Hey y'all, we're going to cover the UK legislative branch. The important thing about Parliament and the UK and legislative branch is that this is really the superior, supreme political institution in Britain. Um, the British Parliament is the number one authority in all of the United Kingdom, even though Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales have their own style or smaller subnational legislative branches. The UK Parliament, located in London, is the superior um, political institution in all of the state. So to kind of recap some of the UK basics of their government, it is a constitutional monarchy, which means that the powers of the Queen are limited by rule of law or constitution, and it's really the Parliament the Parliament makes the laws or the acts of Parliament are what dictate how government is run in the UK. The Parliament is, of course, elected by the people, making it a representative democracy. Parliamentary sovereignty is that the Parliament has the power; they can make or overturn any law. Now, the EU, the European Union, whatever law the European Union had passed, used to be able to override or go above or be supreme over British law, but no longer really a thing since there is the Brexit vote and Brexit was passed. And one of the reasons why Brexit was passed is because the people in the United Kingdom did not like the idea that a supranational government like the European Union was able to dictate laws that they had to follow. Even though they had representation in the EU, they still didn't like the fact that they had to follow the EU's laws. Remember that the UK is a unitarian state, which means, remember, unitarian does not mean that there's only one branch of government. Unitarian means there is only one level of government. So we're in the United States, we have a federal system where powers of government are shared between the national and the state and the local levels of government. In the UK, you really do not have that. There are no powers given to the states or the regions. In 1997, however, there was the devolution of power to Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales. But the power really, acts of parliament that govern the political norms and the services inside the United Kingdom are really held at the parliamentary level in London. So Scotland, they have their parliament. Northern Ireland and Wales have national assemblies. Now, that leads us to the West Lothian question. So what is the West Lothian question? The question is should members of parliament that come from Northern Ireland and members of parliament, so MPs, that come from Scotland and Wales that serve on the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, should they be able to vote on matters that affect just England? Since England doesn't, the English MPs that sit in the British Parliament don't get to go to Scotland and don't get to go to Northern Ireland and don't get to go to Wales, and they don't get to vote on their issues in those other regions. So the question would be is, if you have an MP that's representing Scotland, Northern Ireland, or Wales, should they be able to really have a say and vote on acts of parliament that affect England? And that, again, that's something that is debated, and you can see the pros and cons, and that's something that we'll talk about in class. Fusion of power. This is the whole idea behind a parliamentary system, that there is no separate president that has the separation of powers and checks and balances over the parliament. There is a prime minister, and the prime minister is actually a member of the UK parliament. So there goes the idea of separation of powers like we have in the United States. And that's what makes a parliamentary system different than a presidential system, is that you do not have the separation of powers in a parliamentary system. Rather, the powers are shared. and because the Prime Minister is a part of the Parliament. Okay, so Parliament is bicameral. There are two houses, so there's the House of Commons, and this is the lower house. This is the house with the most power. There are 650 members of the House of Commons, and each one of those members represent the 650 districts, and there are 650 districts throughout the United Kingdom. Okay, so that includes Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and England. Okay, so they are single-member districts. You win that district by a plurality, so whoever is the first person to win a majority of the vote in their district, they win the seat. In the UK, they call their members of parliament MPs, where we call our people reps or representatives or senators. All right, so they're MPs. It is about 70,000 people per MP. And if you compare that to the United States, remember we were talking about how there needs to be equal population within each House of Representatives district in the United States, roughly about equal population. And our representatives represent about 700,000 people. That's a huge difference. So MPs actually have a lot less constituents or people that they have to answer to. Here's something that's also different from the United States. They don't have to live in the district that they represent. They can live in, if you're an MP in England, you can technically live in Wales. You don't have to live in that district. So that's different from the US, where our representatives have to live within the district that they represent. So Bobby Scott has to live in the 3rd district. And party leaders, so the head of the Labour Party or the head of the Conservative Party, they'll run in seats, or in districts, The party leaders will run in districts that they know that party can win. So they know that they're going to be able to keep their leadership position. Okay, again, plurality, first past the post. We know you don't need a majority. In order to win, you just need to have the most votes to win. And they serve a 5-year term. A 5-year term, and then every 5 years there is an election. It used to be whenever the Prime Minister wanted to have an election, he could call an election. But in the Fixed Terms Acts of 2011, Parliament said that you had to have a 5-year maximum. That's when you had to have an election. So before that, the Prime Minister could call an election whenever he thought it was advantageous for his party. Now, because of the first past the post, something that is similar to the United States system, the first past the post really does allow for a dominance of 2 parties in the Parliament. You do have other parties that have been getting a little bit more popular. So like the Liberal Democrats, the Scottish National Party, so on and so forth. Here you have a party that, and I don't want to pronounce it because I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, Plaid, but that's a Welsh party. All right, so the thing is that the first past the post allows for the Conservative Party to be overrepresented in the number of seats that they have. So that's the same as in the United States, where the first past the post makes it harder for minor parties to win. Okay, so again, you have your 2 houses, you have your House of Commons, and then the House of Lords. So I'm going to talk about the House of Lords. Now, House of Commons is going to be kind of represented with the green, and House of Lords is going to be represented with the red. Okay. House of Lords is the upper house. It is a hereditary parliament, which means basically you get to be a member of the House of Lords because your father or your family was members of the House of Lords. These are your lords, your dukes, And then you also have clergy, your religious members in the House of Lords. There are 800 members of the House of Lords. And if you think of, if any of you out, because I've asked you, have you ever watched Downton Abbey with your mom or whatever, or your dad? You'll see that they're dukes or these like noblemen. Those are the type of people that would serve in the House of Lords. It actually, and funny enough, you would think that these people would have a lot of power because they are hereditary and their people have served in the House of Lords for decades. But honestly, they have minimal influence. The Lords have gradually declined in their authority. They can add amendments to bills, and they can change and delete things with the majority of vote, but really the power within Parliament resides in the House of Commons. There are 800 members in the House of Lords. They are life peers. Life peers are appointed by the monarch on advice of the Prime Minister. There are hereditary peers, and these are the people within the House of Lords that are there because their fathers were there, their grandfathers were there. There are Lords Spiritual, so these are Church of England officials. So priests, cardinals, right, people who organize the church, archbishops, bishops from the Church of England. And then you have crossbenchers, and these are independents. These are peers that sit on the benches between the government and the opposition. Okay, so when you're talking about the United Kingdom's parliamentary system, the government is the majority and the opposition is the minority party. So if you were to translate that into the United States, the government in the United States Congress right now would be the Republicans, and the opposition would be the Democrats. Because the Republicans have a majority, they're considered the government because they're the ones that get to dictate the running of the government because they have all the political power. The Democrats are there to question and be a counterpoint or play devil's advocate to what the Republicans want. And that's the same idea of the opposition party within both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. All right, so the crossbenchers are the independents or peers that sit on the benches between the government and the opposition, and they're independents. They don't take a side. The House of Lords has a limited role in legislation. Like I said, they can debate bills that come from the House of Commons. They can refine them. They can amend them. They can delay them. But they can't block legislation, not like our Senate. Not like when something comes from the House of Representatives, our Senate can throw a block or a hold on it and keep it from moving on. That doesn't happen. Here's just the numbers of bishops. Okay, so there's 26 bishops. The Conservatives right now are the government because they have a majority. So there's 225. You have 176 crossbenchers or independents. 211 Labor, 101 Liberal Democrats. You have non-affiliated people who just choose not to play a part in the party politics at all. Okay, now, back to the House of Commons, because we're going to go into how a bill becomes a law in the Parliament. All right, so again, the majority party is the government, Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and the collective responsibility all make up the House of Commons or the government. The shadow government or the loyal opposition, these are the people who are not in the majority. So the opposition are people who don't hold the most seats or a majority of the seats. So that would be like your Labour or your Scottish National Party or your Liberal Democrats. I'm going to pause right here and we're going to pick up at part 2 in 1 second.